Hey folks, it's michaeljohnson.tv. Welcome to my little highlight reel of the latest projects I'm up to in TouchDesigner, my Energy Sketch YouTube videocast series, and Blender, and a few slow-mo videos I've been taking of nice roiling and boiling structures. Hope you enjoy the tour. See you later. Okay, welcome to the TouchDesigner random lines graphic. That's the one that I like to have on the stream here. And here's the view of it on the left. And I'll take you through rapidly through the node editor and how I make this in TouchDesigner. So we start with a geo. There's a geometry system here that has a bunch of lines. This is a geometry element, which is a line. And I instance a bunch of lines all fanning out at the origin of the geo system in TouchDesigner. And then I have a bunch of noise here, noise tops that have the same width in pixels as the number of instances that I want. And I have a little text dat here, table dat. I can change the number of lines, the speed multiplier for the position of how they shift, and the speed multiplier of the rotation and how fast they rotate. And these are settings that I've found to work. So I make a bunch of noises, and then those go primarily into the instancer in the geo, and they set the color of the material for those lines based on a constant. And then I render this. And then the other stuff, the smearing and the motion blurring and the zooming in and out, this is from a feedback loop. So I do a feedback loop from the render with a blur, a transform, and a level. And the transform is rotation and zooming in and out, scaling, and that's driven by two noise chops here, a scale feedback and a rotation for the feedback. And the brightness is also controlled by another noise here, and those settings have been tweaked. And here there's a separate part that I'd get into later. Normally there'd be a music track that would go along with this that would be ding, 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 ding type of bells. And that goes by Open Sound Control, OSC. I send signals out from this OSC out into into VCV Rack, another program that I might talk about another time, and then it makes music. And then at the end we have a composite and goes to BG, and I record a movie file out. So that's random lines in TouchDesigner. Stay tuned for the next little snippet. Okay, folks, welcome to the next piece in the portfolio, the smokestack slit scan. I love to take pictures of these textures and features and sort of physical phenomena like turbulence and smokestacks and waterfalls and things like this. And then I use TouchDesigner to do particular effects like the one that you see here, which is called like a slit scanning effect. It's sort of a one-sided slit scanning. Essentially, I'm capturing the pixels at the end at this location in the original image and sort of transmitting them in a flow. So sort of capturing the image here and then translating it down. And I imagine that at the end of this thing, at the end here, you could sort of have like a ticker tape, and this pattern could just repeat all around. You could print it out on like a receipt printer kind of thing. This is kind of my vision here, and I just love seeing the variation in the position of the elements here. Okay, folks, we're going to jump to the next section now, which is the Energy Sketch weekly video cast that I deliver on Mondays at 12:12 p.m. on youtube.com/@EnergySketch. And I've been using Blender for this in a cool way to do simple images, to add on elements to existing images, and I focus on things of infrastructure. So this particular episode was about the challenge of decarbonizing islands, and this is a power plant in Quebec, run by Hydro-Quebec, that burns basically bunker fuel oil. They have these two large tanks that they use to store the fuel, and I wanted to visualize how much real estate would be required to power that, to store that same amount of energy in the form of hydrogen. So I used Blender basically with a reference program called fspy to add these extra tanks that it would be that approximately 10 times the volume of the fuel oil would be required in the form of like gaseous or liquefied hydrogen. I don't remember which one, but one of those. I think gaseous compressed hydrogen here, and that's just the gas volume. So let me show you how I do this type of stuff using fspy and Blender. It's going to be on a different project, but you'll see what I'm up to. Same type of thing here. This was an announcement from Form Energy. I wanted to use Blender in order to sort of build other elements on here and kind of use it actually to measure the scale of this field of batteries. I use this program called fspy. Now, what you do in fspy, and I'll dim the image to show you, you put in vanishing, how many axes that there are basically with vanishing lines. So here the red is like the x-axis, and then the green is the y-axis, and the blue is the z-axis in the same way that's like RGB, XYZ. In Blender, colors and vectors are sort of interchangeable, which is kind of neat. So I put the origin right here because I knew there's a 40-foot, I assume it's a 40-foot transport truck here. And so that's where I put the origin, and then I draw these two lines. These green lines are parallel, and these red lines are, well, parallel with the parallax. So then what fspy does is it calculates the necessary camera parameters, and then you go over to Blender and you open the fspy project in Blender, and it sets up a camera, it sets up the origin, and it gives you this image as the background image. So you press, numpad 0 for those Blender fans, and it brings you to this image. So then what I did is, just to check on it, I added different elements here. So first thing I did is I added a little 40-foot plane here. There's a plane here that I added. So I added a 40-foot plane from the origin just to check my calibration, and that's good. So we can hide that. And then I added this field of batteries here. So I essentially just added a plane in Blender, extruded the edges, and then what I can do is actually measure it. I can hit N for info, and it shows me the dimensions. So the dimensions of this, and I could do the same thing for these solar fields. And then what I'm interested in is seeing the scale of other energy infrastructure and what it would look like on top of that. But first, what I did is just constructed the battery modules also. Then I can measure. I counted how many of them there were. You can sort of reverse engineer some infrastructure from these sort of things that are announced in the news. New project for energy storage. So let's get rid of those. And that's the original, you remember. So let's keep this battery field. It's kind of like a nice blank canvas. And then what I did is I added some gas turbines. I went onto my company's public website and looked at the dimensions of these turbines, and then modeled them simply in Blender using fspy on another photo. And then the idea was I'm looking specifically at a kind of an iron for energy. Happy to talk to people about metal fuels anytime. These are kind of like two silos, and I wanted to see how big those silos would need to be to store like an equivalent amount of energy to the iron air batteries that the Form Energy technology. And then you'd need to add electrolyzers, and so I want to see the scale of this stuff. So that's how I use Blender, and then you can see it's a 3D model. I don't have the background anymore. But I can zoom around my model. I could add a person. I could render this. You could do all sorts of stuff. And then you can zoom back out and have it sort of located in the reference picture. So I love this way of working with Blender and fspy. See you in the next one. Okay, folks, welcome to the next segment. Welcome to the slow-mo video extravaganza. So I love to take these slow-mo videos. This one's particular was taken with my iPhone 12 Pro. It's got the LiDAR scanning, the Face ID. I like to use these tools also, and it has slow-mo video, notionally at like either 120 or 240 frames per second, but it's kind of a variable frame rate. I've been geeking out on that a little bit lately. I just love, this is the Lachine Canal, and there's a sort of a water feature right next to a locks, in the canal. And so I took 3 levels of zoom, right? On the iPhone, there's like 0.5. This is at 0.5. Then I'll go to 1, and then I'll go to 2. So I'll zoom in progressively on an element of a feature here. And so I'm mesmerized by this structures, and I love to see the oscillations, right? There's sort of like there's a frequency of this, and the water goes down, and then at some point, it kind of like explodes, that droplet that falls, and then sort of shatters into like micro droplets. that sort of happens at some point on the way down. So that's the first level of zoom. Now we'll go to the next and look at these structures. Look at this line here, this sort of wavy line, and that's where things get shed and then they explode. Boom, it explodes, right? This track, you just try to track those little features as they fall and sort of follow them. It's quite mesmerizing. And then fully zoomed in will be the next one. You can see that line here a bit more, and a line in behind where the sun is shining. That's sort of waving, flapping and waving, and all the water features. It's lovely that the sunlight was coming from behind here, so it really illuminated the water in a lovely way. Okay, folks, michaeljohnson.tv, thanks so much for checking out the highlight reel in the studio. Be well, and love to hear about your projects in TouchDesigner, YouTube, Blender, whatever you're up to. Take care. Toodaloo.